Hello, it's me again. And we're gonna get started with another great and exciting Flash video tutorial! Seriously though, you get started by creating an ActionScript 3.0 document. It's a serious business. And what we wanna do is save it as something nice and pretty. I'm gonna go on my H drive, call it Mr. Davis. You put your name, of course. Intro to Arrays. That's Arrays. Okay. Once you got that spelled nice and pretty, click save. If you didn't quite catch that, bam, it's right here. Let's first go over what arrays are. Arrays are essentially just lists of data or variables or objects or whatever you want to actually call it, but consider it a list. And this list contains all of our objects, and the objects can be pretty much anything you want them to be. So the very first thing we're going to do is learn how to create an array. So on our timeline, let's rename this bad boy up here to actions. Click on frame 1, tap F9. Bam, actions window. And let's put a comment and say, creating arrays. Okay, and this works very similar to all the other variables that we've had, except with one or two minor differences. But we start off with var. Keyword var, give it a name, my array, array1. Let's do that. Tell it the type is an array. And then we need to set it equal to some value. And what you can do is, if you want an empty array, there's two ways of doing this. I'll show you the first way. It's just say new array, okay, and this will just create an empty array. So create empty array, or maybe we could just put empty array, whatever. And the other way to do that, so let's say alternative method, would be to say var, give it a name. So I'm going to say my array2, the type is array, and we'll set it equal to a open, close, square brackets, and then semicolon. And this is also an empty array. Okay, so what this is going to do is create a list of nothing. Useful, right? Not at all. So let's actually make it useful. We like useful things. Bam, ba bam, ba bam, ba bam. Let's keep going down the line with my array, or no, let's call this one useful arrays, right? So let's say creating arrays with, let's say useful, all right, blah. Let's say with data. That's a good word. I like data. Now let's throw some fancy schmancy thingamajigs on the end here so that we can separate this stuff out and it actually looks like we're getting to a new section over here. So you don't have to do this. I just like to do it sometimes because it makes things a little easier to read. I know what's going on. So we're going to create arrays with actual data. So var keyword, let's give it a name. So I'll say useful. I believe that's how you spell useful. Useful array 1. So the other ones are useful, but they're pretty much nothing if there's nothing in them, right? So we're going to say equals, what do we want equal to? A new array, just kind of like we did before. Open, close, semicolon. But wait, that looks exactly like this. It does! So we need to make one tiny minor change. And what that is, okay, inside of these parentheses, no, I'm kidding. Inside of these parentheses, you need to tell it what type of data it's going to hold. Or essentially give it the list of what it's holding. So we're going to use the string literals here so we can type in any kind of text. So I'll just put double quote word 1, put a comma to separate out your stuff. I'll put in word 2, and then let's say word, make sure there are quotes around these because these are not variable names, they are actual text. Word 3. And for this particular instance, I've put strings inside of this array. Now, Flash allows you to put multiple types of data. So I could have a string, I can have numbers, I can have, whatever I like in the same array. But most programming languages do not allow that, and for the sake of making your lives easier, if you ever learn that one day, we're going to make sure we use the same type of data for every array. So We'll have an array for strings, we'll have an array for numbers, but we'll never really use an array for both strings and numbers, if that makes sense. So we're creating an array with 3 words in it here. And let's go ahead and do the alternative method. So I'm just going to copy this up here, paste, and we'll say var useful array 2 array equals new array. And then here what we're going to do is say the same thing. We'll use, oops, sorry, not new array. We're using the other method. So open, close, square brackets. And then now we have to give it the information that we want to throw in. So let's do this one as numbers. So we'll say 1, 2, 3. So this is an array of numbers. I guess they're ints technically, INTS. And this up here, array of strings. Okay, but let's actually do something with this data. How do we get it back? Oops, excuse me, I didn't mean to do that. How do we get this data back? How do we spit it back out? Well, there's 2 ways of doing that. You can just say let's put a comment here, how to get data back. And then we'll throw some more fancy schmancy lines everywhere because we are super duper cool. So how to get data back? Well, we can just use the whole array if we want the entire array. So we can say here, if we want whole array, then you just use the name. Just use the name. So for instance, we'd say trace useful array 1. And then we can also trace useful array 2. So I'm just copying and pasting. So what this should do is trace out all the contents of useful array 1 and all the contents of useful array 2. So you should see something like word 1, word 2, word 3, and then 1, 2, 3. So running, bada bing, bada boom, bada boom. There we go. We have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And that's useful if you just want to see what's actually in the array. But if you're actually trying to manipulate the data, not really useful. So let's say if we want to get 1 item in the array, how do we do that? Well, there's a super secret special technique with square brackets where you just say, well, first let's throw down a trace, okay? Because trace is just so we spit it into the output. We'd have to give the array name, so say useful array square brackets, and then inside you give it a number. And the number is called an index. So up here I'll put a comment called use the index. And if we wanted to get the first item in our index, you'd think normally we'd just say the number 1, right? Wrong. Indexes start at 0. For whatever reason, this was decided upon super long time ago, where if I use this, it'll actually get me the second item in the array, because the first item is 0, the second item is 1. So this would be 0, this would be 1, and I'd be getting word 2. So I'm going to throw down the word 0. Okay? Or sorry, not the word 0, the number 0. And that'll get us this one here. So use the index, and let's put another comment. Indexes, or it's probably indices, but I want to say indexes start at 0. Okay, so what this is going to do is pull back the first thing and say word 1. Before we do that, though, let's trace out some dividers so we can see what on earth is going on here. So just some kind of little line, bada bing, bada boom. So we should get the first item in our list using 0, and uh-oh, we messed up. Of useful array. Oops, I forgot the 1. Useful array 1, that's the name, not just useful array. My bad. You should have noticed that. You're better than that. Bam! So we have word 1, word 2, word 3. This is all the old stuff. And then we just said word 1. So same thing with useful array 2. Okay, so let's say we want to get the third element, which is number 3. We'd say 2 because it's at index 2. Okay, so we'll say trace useful array 2. We'll say 2, and then bam. So it'll say trace out the first item in the list for I just put in parentheses the 0 index. I guess at the 0 index. That makes sense. And we can copy this. And just so you can look at this later and see what's going on, trace out the, not the first item, but the third item in the list at the 2 index. So what it should trace out is word 1, and then useful array 2. 2 should be the, nope, not the number 2, but the number 3, because it goes 0, 1, 2. And we have 3. Okay. So this might be a little better if we actually spit out what we're doing in the trace as well. Just say this is this value, blah 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 blah. Do we want to do that? Yeah, we're gonna do that just because I want you guys to remember this and be able to look at it and not have to think too much about what's going on. So let's just copy this here. So double click, Control C to copy, Control V to paste. So useful array 1's 0 index. And then we'll do something like that for this here. So we'll say this plus useful array 2's 2 index. Okay, and I actually want to put a colon or something like that. Yeah. So then that way we actually get something out here that indicates what we're actually getting, you know? So, bam, that's it. Pretty simple for now. We'll get more into detail with this in a bit. But we have 2 methods of creating arrays. You set the array equal to new array or just open close square brackets. There's no difference between the two. One's just shorter than the other. And same thing if we want data, we just do the same exact thing, except we put all of our words, or not words, or our items, or data, or values, whatever, separated by commas. And then if we want to access them back, we have to access them by typing out the array's name, and then square brackets, and inside of the square brackets goes the index. So this I want something at 2, this I want, or sorry, this I want the 0 index, this I want 2, and just remember that indexes start at 2. Now this can be a little complicated, a little confusing, but we'll work through this a couple times and hopefully you'll get the hang of it. But just imagine it as a list of items, and when you say, I want item number 1, bam, you go and get it, and you do a little dance. That's it. You got this. I know you do. Stay classy.